everyone. My name is Shannon Kennedy. I am an A&R agent for Forsyth County, and I'm here with Jessica Warren. Jessica works for Camden County Extension, and she does a lot of work with invasive species today. So welcome, Jessica. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Shannon.
Yeah, of course. So what is an invasive species?
That's a great question. So an invasive species is something that's not native, something that doesn't naturally belong here, but what makes it invasive is that it doesn't have any natural predators usually, so nothing else eats it like it would in its home territory, and it usually displaces or takes the home of other species. So a lot of times it can actually cause damage to the whole ecosystem that it's living in here, because it's using resources like food or shelter that our native species need.
Okay, so like some of the plants in my front yard, they might be non-native, but they're
not necessarily invasive.
Okay,
exactly.
That's good to know.
So yeah, you can have, there's lots of things that we plant that are non-native. Like I have some non-native iris that are in my flower beds, but they're not going to spread like an invasive species would. So those iris are pretty much going to stay where I plant them, and they may, take up a little bit of space, but they're not going to spread. A lot of the invasive species that we deal with, they have they're very they have very large reproductive abilities. So basically, they produce a lot of seeds or berries or other things that spread to other places, and they can also push out a lot of our native species where they're planted.
Okay, so is it only plants that can be invasive, or are other organisms potentially invasive?
That's a great question. So it is not just plants. We deal with a lot of animals as well. You may have heard about feral hogs that can tear up a lot of farmers' land or just anybody's property that weren't native here. In Florida, you hear a lot about Burmese pythons, which are these huge snakes. They aren't that dangerous to humans, but they're very dangerous to wildlife, because these snakes can get to be 14, 16 feet long. Talking about some really big pythons.
Yeah.
As people released them that had them as pets because they didn't want them anymore, and they thought, oh, I'll just send it back to nature. But if it's not where they belong, they can do a lot of harm.
Okay, so what makes them really bad is that they are eating things or crowding out other things, right?
Yep, exactly. So it varies from species to species. Like we have some plants that we deal with that just take over like our native forest. And then the things that belong there can't grow there. The animals that would use the native plants for habitat don't have them there. But then in the case of something like the Burmese python, it's not so much that it takes up the habitat, it's that it eats a lot of stuff that doesn't have any defense against that python, and nothing feeds on the python. So it kind of just goes crazy. They have lots of babies, and they, eat lots of other animals and cause a lot of destruction.
Yeah. So, you mentioned a lot of these invasive species, but their native habitat is like halfway across the world. How do things get here and become invasive?
That's a great question. And there's a number of different ways. Some of them we know how they got here, and some of them we don't. Some things we brought over ourselves before we knew any better. Humans are flawed as well. So sometimes we've brought things over for erosion control, like up where you live, there's a lot of kudzu. Brought over for erosion control back in probably the 30s, that's a guess. And then we have something down here called beach vitex that was originally brought over to help stabilize the dunes, but actually just takes over the dunes and keeps the sea turtles from nesting. So bring things over, and sometimes it may be things that we collect when we're in another state or another country that we just think are so pretty that we need in our gardens here. But think about the fact that they may be invasive here, whereas they're not invasive where they naturally grow.
Okay, so
accident too, like we live where I'm at on the coast. We have ports above us in Brunswick and Savannah and ports below us in Jacksonville. And all the things that we buy that get shipped from other countries, sometimes the water that's used and held in those boats can bring invasives over accidentally or even in the shipping containers.
Oh, wow. Yeah. They're hitchhiking.
They are.
So, you hear a lot about invasive species and how prevalent they are. Is there anything being done about them?
Yeah, so, and everyone can do something to help as well. So there are groups. I'm part of the Coastal Georgia Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area. We call it the SISMA for short. And in a lot of states, we have SISMAs or weed management areas that are groups of federal and state and non-governmental organizations that work together in an area to try and manage invasive species. But there's things that local people can do too. If you have learning what the invasive species in your area are and getting rid of them in your landscape, that's a big help in itself. Your local extension agent is a great resource for that if you're unsure about a plant that you have. Also talking to the places that you buy plants, whether that be Home Depot or Lowe's or small nurseries, and encouraging them not to sell invasive plants. Georgia is one of 4 states in the U.S. that does not have a noxious weed law. Most other states do, so that you're not allowed to sell things that are invasive, so that we then have to spend money to try to control them. So you could also write to your legislators. Nobody's too young to write to the legislators and ask for more laws or regulations around invasive species. If you have pets that you decide you don't want, do not release them. Try to home them, and if you can't rehome them, the best thing to do for them and for the environment is to euthanize them, which is a big word that means they just won't be living anymore.
Yeah.
Don't move firewood. So a lot of people don't think about it, but if I came up to Forsyth County and you had a tree that had fallen and I could use that for firewood at my house, it wouldn't be right for me to bring it all the way back down to the coast, because there may be insects in that firewood that belong in Forsyth County but are not safe, don't belong down here at the coast, and could actually cause problems and kill a lot of our native forest. So we moved a lot of pests by moving things like firewood too. And then another simple thing and an awesome thing you can do to get involved is when you see invasive species or what you think are invasive species, you can report them. There's a great program, and it's housed at the University of Georgia. It's called EdMaps, and it's for anybody to use. EdMaps, which I think we'll share the link to, but it's eddmaps.org. You can go on there and create an account, and when you find invasive species, you can just use your phone and take a picture of what you're seeing and tell them where you are. And somebody like me will check it out and see if that's really what it is and help keep up with how much these things are spreading.
Wow, that's really awesome. So I was thinking about invasive species at the coast versus here, and I was kind of wondering, there must be ones that are different, right? So what is the weirdest invasive species you have on the coast?
Well, that would be a matter of opinion, but I think the one that gets the most interest, especially that I've done some work with, is the island apple snail. So I actually brought one of those shells to show you guys, and this is not nearly as big as they get. This, they can get to be the size of a softball. This one's empty, as you can see, no snail in it anymore. But these guys can produce a huge amount of babies. They have these egg masses that are neon pink. That they lay along pond edges and water bodies. And these guys do a lot of damage because they eat a lot of vegetation. So this is a really big snail.
Yeah.
It eats a lot and makes a lot of babies, and can displace, like we talked about before, take habitat that other creatures need. So everybody's pretty fascinated by the really big snails.
Yeah.
And I always get asked if you can eat them.
That would be one solution.
It would be, except interestingly, if you don't cook them well enough, you could get rat lungworm.
Oh.
Don't even know what that does to you, but when you say rat lungworm, people are no longer interested in eating snails.
Well, thank you for talking with us today about invasive species. I learned a lot.
Well, I'm glad to do it. I had a great time.
All right, thank you.